The child father who loves him, now loves him, marries him. The willing are dragged along by the circumstances. The unwilling are dragged along by that. Tonight here in Pretoria City Hall, we want to say in the clearest language to the government of the day that the willing are dragged along by the circumstances and are led on the path to their own Boerevolksstaat. And the government is going to decide whether it wants to know or not. The unwilling must only walk together, because the willing are taken on the path to freedom, on the path to their fatherland, on the path to the land where they have already paid for us, in fixed pavements of blood and with mothers' tears. The willing are on the path, and the unwilling have no choice. They must only walk together, Mr. Speaker. Why? Why do circumstances create? Why are circumstances busy leading the willing to a certain point? Because it is the reality. The reality is that the people cannot be without a country without a ground. The reality is that the people cannot be without a country without a ground. Because the reality is that the Boerevolk will never degrade without their own fatherland. Not the reality that TV Buta and reports say. Not the reality that TV Buta and reports say. The reality is, Mr. Speaker, that every roll of earth has the right to own is individual property. The reality is, Mr. President, that every roll of earth has the right to own is individual property. That each people on the world has the right to own is country. That each people on the world has the right to own is country. That each people on the world has the right to own is land. Because the reality is that peace can only exist between peoples when there are borders that separate peoples from each other. The unrealistic is when you want to hunt all peoples and one great citizen state together, and then want to develop a kind of peace concept between Mohammedans and Christians, between farmers and between peasants. That is unrealistic, even though you also use the taxpayers to pay for such an advertisement as the government does. There can only be peace when the peoples of the world have the opportunity to sound the echo that is within them, with the qualities that have been given to them and to them alone. There can only be peace when you, within the concept of diversity and within the framework of different peoples and countries, draw borders where within peoples and nations, in peace next to each other and fulfilling each other's conditions, no one can take anything away from anyone else. And now the government says here, Mr. Chairman, the Afrikaner must, for example, give away everything that he has. And he must go and adapt it. He must go and adapt it in a citizen state. He must go and adapt it to children and Indians and blacks. It is the only people on earth that his country is taken over by his own people. Mr. Chairman, in the history of peoples and nations, there has never been a prime minister or a state president who is willing to sacrifice his own people to be something for another people that has not yet been established. Just look at the people. Now, if I had been asked in the past few weeks, in the past 6 to 8 weeks, has the Afrikaner resistance movement totally overshadowed the Parliament? In the past few weeks, has the full power of the AWB hit the Parliament in Cape Town so that little children and Indians sit on the legs of old Magnus, Malang, Piperach and Kank for weeks alone on the march of the Boervolk and the Transvaal? The end of the power of the AWB is not yet in sight. It is the beginning of the uprising of a people that has become thick for the treachery of these little papery jelly mannequins who sit there without being aware that an election must be chosen so that the people can decide whether they want to be there or not. President, now comes your young grubber. You say to me, he is actually a grubber, but now I stop talking about him as your young grubby hair. President, now comes your young grubby hair here on Brits. But before the time when he said he's going to hold a meeting in Brits to show his support for the people. President, he's going to hold a meeting, an open meeting in Brits, to prove how acceptable he is to the voters of Brits. Because you see, President, in the wake of his meeting, the old boy has been sitting there for 5 years on the taxpayer of Brits, his costs. And then after 5 years, he says he's going to show how acceptable he is. He steps in there in Brits, but he first meets for his preparations. And he brings with him a professional boxer. President, and he grabs his hair, and he grabs his hair, and he sits his hair down, and he does not hear anything. It is too far from his young grubber, from his young grubby hair. He sits here for a summer next to him on the platform, President. Now you can imagine yourself, how is it that Kali Knutse in one single hour decides he becomes a politician, and he sits on the floor of Parliament? What has President, what has young grubby hair promised for Kali Knutse? If old Kali with his boxing invention decisively decides before he knows the politics, I am going to do Parliament first, as can be generally accepted, that Mr. Grubbelar of Brits said to him, Kali, if you come to help me, then I will take your Parliament. Because old Kali says, President, he says shamelessly in the press, he says he actually wants to go into politics, but he says he wants to go to Parliament first, to debate politics there. Can you imagine? That means the childish innocence of the same old Kali there, who on my horse here by the fountains 4 years ago almost fell off the horse. There the same old Kali says he has to learn politics in the Parliament. He says then he goes into politics. He goes to Parliament first, he says, and then he goes into politics. It can only be old Johnny van Brits who lied to Kali like that. Kali, old Kali. It doesn't work like that in the man. You can't go into Parliament first and then learn politics. You must first learn politics and first walk under the hands of Johnny van Brits before you can enter the Parliament. But now there are a few realities that you and I tonight have to look at, President, and fellow farmers. If there is one thing that Kali can do well, he can count to 10, President. That's why he had to count to 10 when he was there for a while on the ground in Mobato, President, when he counted out, and there the 10 counting. And if Kali says there were only 10 nationalists on Brits, then there were only 10 nationalists on Brits, because none of us has as painful an experience as the number 10. Kali knows that there were only 10, and apparently there were only 10. President, now I say, Uncle Jan Grobhaar, now he says, President, he says on television, he says the AWB was on the total transfer in order to break up his meeting. Now, there are a few realities, President. Now, there are a few realities. And the first reality is that in the last 2-3 months, not a single room in any election department of any member of the National Party has set up the proper house where the AWB spoke. No one has. No one has. It is not for us to take 1,000 AWBs on Brits. Because we have now, a few months ago, we also had 1,000 there. There, the evening of the slaughter on Brits, we spoke with between 2,000 and 3,000 farmers on Witbank, I and the assistant leader of the AWB. And if we then have the whole transfer, the question becomes even bigger for Mr. Grobelaar. Where were your voters then to protect your passport on Brits when the AWB broke up the entire transfer? I will tell him where his voters were after, Mr. President. He has no more voters on Brits. He says here in the press, he says in the National Party, yeah, he makes me think so much about the jackals who lost their star. He knows. And then he stands there with his life behind him on the Doornbosch in his big meeting. And he calls all the animals together. And he says, animals do not look good with a long star. And then someone sees jackals who lost their star. And then they laugh at him. And then this star works off-cambering what he did not plan. Because the voters do not want any more jackals. Now he says, in the press, he says, he thinks the National Party now just has to read the meetings in the transfer totally off. Dear Mr. President, let us say to our friends of the National Party, the hourglass is busy to run out. You have time until tonight to decide where you stand. Members of the People's Council of the National Party, come back to the people, come back to the farmers, come back to the Africans and to the white men, and you are welcome to come and talk to us, but you will not come for us to lie and deceive the South Africans. When you have a people, dear Mr. President, when you have a people's democratic right, their right to speech, their right to speech, their right to conversation about their country's interests, the thing that him, what, his wife, what, his child, what, his future touch, when you take it away for an election, when you, in other media, build a power media, radio and television and press, and you take away his right to talk to him, then you are dealing with the greatest betrayal against the people there. Says the well-known Dutch statesman and theologian Kuyper Daniel in the clearest language. A people must talk to each other. He must be guided through talking to the government. He must be able to talk about what concerns him. Speaker. And he says in the clearest language, if the right to be taken is taken, then the people must protest. N.P. van Wicklow says, the heartache of everything is when a massacre passes, if he does not have the right to protest. Kuyper says, Mr. Speaker, and on top of that is the total reformation. Where is the building? Where is the one who wants to turn the Bible and force it so that liberals can fit, so that they can shoot each other in the sculpture room and dance together, the dead dance, so that Van der Kemp and Riek, the old man, the Cape, can dance? Kuyper says, Speaker, Kuyper says, the Great Reformation. Kuyper says, a people does not have only rights. A people has the right to speech to speech. He must talk to the state. And if the state is to take the right there, then he must protest against it. And I'm not standing before you tonight to call you to a revolution, but I'm standing before you tonight, and I say to you, like Reagan of America said, when he said, I will send my soul to the world and expect that they will be killed without giving them the right to defend themselves. I say tonight, you have taken the open media into your hands. You once planted a jingo press in Cape Town. You have, with the power of the money behind you, with the holy old cow of the Progressive Party, old Oppenheimer, You have come to kill the Transvaaler in Transvaal. You have come to kill the Transvaal's daydreams. You have sent in the left-wing jingo press. You have, under the name of the housemate, who used to be the interpreter of the African family's will, you have come to put the seed of destruction, monster-like, into the Boers' homes. You have your clothing problems, your old pants, which never gave the clothing any ground. You have thrown your party politics on the Africans who did not have a clothing problem. You have your hymns of a language which has been put in the English and has a red cap. You have thrown Transvaal into the Free State. You control the total public media. You control the press. You control radio and television. Now we say to you, one thing you cannot control, and that is the public platform. That is the AWP, the KP, and the IPC. So much is needed to control all of this. Apartment where you cannot vote, or even since you were born, you have to depend on the command of the government. And desert is also a problem. The big problem we are having, tell us, is that you even know the facts. You are the one in charge of the government, and smear a report on the corners of the streets. But where the people come together, it's not conservatives, it's right-wingers and farmers. You can vote for us. Today, Mr. P.W. Boothhead, today the government of South Africa, tried to get in Pretoria City Hall the enthusiasm and the willingness of the Boer people to have, like the AWB drives it tonight. He can't. Of course he can't, Speaker, because Mr. Boothhead is no longer the government and the interpreters of the will of a people. Every people on earth, no matter how big or small, every civilization, every existence of a people, out of a people that turns a certain emotion around, emotion that sprung and arose out of its soil, out of the struggle of yesterday to possess the soil. Every people draws the marks of yesterday's struggle in their own hands. Every people on earth looks back joyfully at what he calls his own, and his own can be alone. There the struggle of yesterday, which for him is especially his own, whether he's German or Dutchman or British or American, whether he's Russian now and whether he's Romanian. Every people has a certain own history in their own country. And the sense of existence of every people's race lies precisely in that he has walked a different path than other peoples. And what the government in South Africa has now built was to want to make the paths of yesterday dead. To want to deny that the emotion that is in us is fed by the values and the truths, by the greatness of yesterday. You cannot negotiate in a people with the United Peoples. You cannot go and buy a people, or go and rule, or go and cancel already there. You cannot go and buy a civilization or conquer through one or the other political tricks. You can only conquer a people as race after race within the framework of the will of the people to work for it. What we in South Africa have done is to make the youngest people on earth a white people who had to go through the storage room and the birth pains to finally stand in the eyes of a world recognized as a people. They're the people who had to go through the sorrows, through the suffering, and through the hell camps of Queen Victoria, had later become known as the Boerewolk. The Boerewolk president is not negotiable, and the country of the Boer is also not negotiable. Because if you do that, then you are busy to change yourself. He who forgets yesterday, and the history is busy to mark his Morris to the lowest possible price. He who ignores that yesterday existed the realities of the values, and the values of yesterday, the anchor pins that geographically a particular country has entered and has proven wants to express, is busy to build his claim to life, to loss and to build. We are not standing tonight here in Pretoria because we hate. We are standing tonight in Pretoria because we are loyal to the gene in our blood that purifies, that prides, that faith, that honor and pride in our hearts to draw, to process it rationally about PW. Botha and his Trawant, it is he until here and no further. Speaker. Now it is interesting to pay attention to the panic of the past weeks or two. I told you in my speech how the violence of the AWB there, the old small mercenary watered Smurfies in the parliament on the green banks captured. Now it is interesting to see how they are looking for themselves allies here, the little men. You do not know who the allies are, the clowns and the Indians that they have brought in to keep their government standing, because they cannot govern anymore as the white man of South Africa alone on their shoulders. They rule with the stones of Rasbansi and Ellen Hendricks. They rule with the one leg courageously in the parliament and the other leg chairman inside inside the pot, and the other on a sambusa that wants to shine. They have known that they are no longer acceptable for the people, and then they give an assignment to the Crespini and old Dennis Harrell children and Indians to work for those that you have, for the people who are there, to keep without the white voter the right to vote this week and the week in which the people of Britain have been. So, but now keep Mr. Botha and Raspansi and Hendrickson still there in Brits. Without the will of the people, he says he who is Mr. Grobbelaar is chairman. He says he is a Democrat, but he brings as a pretext, he drives the boxer in to come and beat his own voters. Look at all the moral qualities that Mr. Kalimak has. He has only one quality, and that is he can hit with a fist. But he brings him, he is going to get him to beat the voters if they do not keep what is being talked about, Mr. Chairman. And as a result of that, his militant attitude, his accusation against our SAP, when he first peeped that the SAP had to protect his passport, and when he did not get justice, he retreated less worthy. That is why he was given the right to throw fire at his comrades of his old Bond coalition at the Clarlingen and the Indiers. Mr. de Vlosser, what happened? Certainly a member of the so-called Council to Parliament, Mr. Christiansen. He comes from Ravensmeet in Clarlingen. He's paid from Pretoria because 75% of the total state income comes in the transfer. And with his 47,000 rand per year, he has to let this member here. What did he say? He said, "Dear Mr. Chairman, listen to his intolerance." Because there in the Transvaal, the farmers speak. They say they just want their own state. They say they do not hate anyone, but they just want what they are. There in the Transvaal, the farmers speak. And they say 86% of all Clarlingen live in the Cape. They have to live in the Cape until they are forgotten. They have to live in the Cape until they are compared. But here in the Transvaal, we do not want them. Mr. Christiansen stands up, he says, and he swings the old Vatdok report around like this. He swings it around like this, and he says, the leader of the AWB has said, the people of the world to cover or to pass. And he says, Mr. Chairman, he says, it has hurt him very much. Now I want to ask in repetition, because I have asked this in the past, why, Mr. Christiansen, has it hurt you so much? Do you see yourself as a coward or as a bastard Mr. Chairman. And he says, you must not see yourself as a coward or a bastard, because I did not want to talk to you now. Why do you feel so comfortable now? Mr. Chairman goes on, and he says, I have to go through the story, because he wants to keep it. It is in the Parliament where there is a decision about tomorrow's future path. He says the AWB makes him very angry, but he says he will just pray for turbulence, because he can never go to heaven. He says he has chased the mayor of the Boer people out of the Parliament. Now he decides the Boers cannot go to heaven anymore, the political power he has gained. Let him decide now about life and heaven and earth. He says, because such a man will never come to heaven. And at the same time, Mr. Chairman, yes, the news, it was a big news for them. Do you see how they are sitting here? The newsmakers for them, the politicians and Indians who were not even voters yesterday. And the newspaper writes, Chairman, they say then Mr. Coburg stands up. Mr. Coburg is also a member of the Parliament, of the politicians. And he says the day, Mr. Chairman, he says the day that you shot us at Blood Rivier, left, right and center, it is now over, that I now have the answer. Mr. Chairman and Mrs. Coburg, man, if we ever have to shoot, we are not going to shoot left, right and center. We are just going to shoot left. Now, Mr. Chairman, you have to listen further. He says, if the police does not want to give us guns, I now speak in the idiom, and I tell you verbatim as he spoke. He says, if the police does not want to give us guns, then we are going to shoot our own AK-74. English African. And if he does not know the difference between an AK-47 or an AK-74, no. But maybe there is already such a modern AK on the market that the farmers do not know. Maybe he wants to get an AK-74. He says we can get a lot of it to do something with it. He says it in the face of the minister. He says to the minister, if the SAPI does not want to give them weapons, he will get a lot of communist weapons to do something with it. And you would think that the white ministers are up in a time of unrest, and he would say to him, you do not know what you are talking about. You would think he would, out of the head of his own, not out of his nationalism and his integrity, not, but just as a responsible minister, would he the man to order? No, President, you do not know what he said. He says, yes, it's good. You have to pray for turbulence, President. Now I say to your minister and your man and your Indian, say, you do not have to pray for me because you pray for a snake god. To the Parliament, what is acceptable for the Mohammedans? Seymour will pray for me. I do not need your prayers. You must never for me. One of your little prayers, what? So Draiba Mohammed, make up the mess. I do not need it in South Africa. And I'm not dealing with injustices. I am busy to make the people of South Africa with each other, both on the party political level, to Jesus God, our fatherland, and our people. Keep to stay. I am not the terrorist. What you want to make is not right here in the press. Seymour, out. Say for the people, I am not the terrorist. I am not a terrorist. And I do not stand for violence. But I vow to be violent. Let my people die under the ANC or the patrician of this rebel, deflated government. Let me not be afraid to speak and make afraid. And I do not receive messages from the three-room system. The farmers do not want anything to do with your three-room system. The farmers do not even want to think to sit in your three-room system. The farmers want their fatherland. Give back what he alone will give. It is wrong. I do not want anyone else to have his fatherland. I do not want anyone else to have his rights. I do not want anyone else to have his language rights. I want the land for which small farmers died. I want my land. My land must be ruled only by my people. I cannot trust anyone to keep God's promised land for Christ. They are sitting in the head. They are so small in the Transvaal, in the Free State. The children and the Indians who have 2/3 of the political power. They are so small that they cannot win one single seat. They are not a political factor, but they are sitting with 2/3 of the political power. In the Free State, in the Transvaal, expect them, Speaker. Expect these people, that a people will sit still, that people who do not even live in their country, the Morris of the most durable treasure of our heart, will determine if you are safe or not, is to say if you are not so brave. I had said earlier, greetings to Mr. President. I have said, do remaining. Thou shalt not convict the crowd, and the state will be jaringero. Thou shalt not unbestuta. And I said, talk, Shane, go together in a country that has been bought with blood, in a country with history behind it, a country where people live, but the greatest emotion can be found in people and the brunt of nationalism and of right and justice in the bosom of the people. Also, when you, the government, are in such a situation, you will never be stopped. I cannot, Mr. P.W. Botha, just as little as you were able to save old Jan Grobler's base on Brits, just as little as the AWB is able to remove the fat man's food from your bases. You have lied to them for too long. You have lied too much. You have made too many false promises in the past. You have led them to a referendum that was the battlefield of the African people. You have said to them, the unlawful law will remain. You have said to them that you, these spiritual criminals who want to bastardize over the border of color, will remain short-sighted. You would not allow that the white criminal and the non-white criminal bring into the world an unlawful, unhappy bastard. You have promised before the referendum. You have promised that the ban on political interference will remain. You have promised that the whites and their white party would put their white candidate there. You have lied to them. You have now admitted that white parties can be taken over by blacks who are members of that party. You have no mandate to bring the blacks into the highest hierarchy, to govern the whites. You have to go back to reality and truth. You have to start acting responsibly, or you will regret the greatest hell revolution that this country has ever seen. Now you have to see. Now you have to see how sharp their eyes are. Now you have to see how today they write a ballpoint pen to the fire chief. They are going to write a star. They are going to write a star there. I repeat, so that you cannot write the wrong thing. I say the government must act responsibly with the truth. He must act responsibly when he makes political statements, when he wants to expel political warlords. He must act close to his people. Otherwise, he will lose his status, where the blood will flow into the country. The AWP does not want blood, but the AWP, because he does not want chaos, disorder, and blood to flow, he stands by his statements of the past, that you create revolutionary circumstances, that you do not change the power that you had to control peace, to ensure stability, to ensure economic progress, to ensure that you are going to give for Ellen Hendricks and for Rabansi. Now you are sitting with 1/3 of that power. You are sitting with the best and the most powerful police force in the whole world. You are sitting with the best people's leader that ever existed. You are sitting with the sons of this Boer folk, and you forbid them to kill the murderers of the dark location that takes people guilty of murder. 1 or 2, 3 or 4 days. And the South African police and the SAV will freeze in order to restore order and stability to South Africa. But you do not let them do it. They become the political football in your hands. And if you are still so conceited that you, on the basis of decrees, issue ordinances that are not even in the police law, and then you lie, then you say, but the AWB propagates violence. May not the light of the AWB be a light of the SAV? Then you say further, you are under pressure. And we know, because there is hardly one white policeman for 2,000 people in South Africa. You are under pressure. You are standing up in Florida, and I say to you, I will give an order to the members of the AWB to join the police reserves, and I double your power. Why? Then the commissar of police hesitated for a few days. Then he said, we do not need him. Why not? Because he knows the AWB wants his country to give its descendants, and the AWB will not take his politics as nonsense. I say in the clearest language, with all due respect, members of the South African police, you have taken an oath of loyalty to your God, your own living area. You have sworn to God, loyal to the people, loyal to your fatherland. One of the South African policemen and one of the members of the South African Army is the program of principles of the African resistance movement. I ask the members of our forces to remain loyal to your food, to remain loyal to the sin of your life while you are in power. Stay loyal to your ideals. Stay loyal to the God for whom you have sworn. Stay loyal to your fatherland, and stay loyal to the people. That is why there can never be a fight between the AWB, the SA, or the SAWA. That is why it is so scandalous that the National Party of the South African peoples and Indians, with the privilege of the parliament, because they know that we cannot stand up for a difficult case in the parliament. And they say the AWB is just as dangerous as the ANC, as our sister Agnes Malang has done it. What can a Deputy Minister of Defense do? It is an impossibility to call the AWB and the ANC at the same time. The AWB stands for order and authority, for God, people, and fatherland. The ANC is a communist body whose task it is to kill the strong Christian and to kill the weak Christian, the woman and the child, in order to demoralize the strong. The AWB, since from this earth, is a product of the will of freedom. The AWB is the offspring of the beloved people who have prayed for a country of their God. The ANC belongs to the hatred of those outside who want to take what is not coming. You have lied too much. You have made too many false promises in the past. You have led them to a referendum that was the battlefield of the African people. You have said to them, the unlawful law will remain. You have said to them that you, these spiritual criminals who want to bastardize over the border of color, will remain short-sighted. You would not allow that the white criminal and the non-white criminal bring into the world an unlawful, unhappy bastard. You have promised before the referendum, you have promised that the ban on political interference will remain. You have promised that the whites and their white party would put their white candidate there. You have lied to them. You have now admitted that white parties can be taken over by blacks who are members of that party, you have no mandate to bring the blacks into the highest hierarchy to govern the whites. You have to go back to reality and truth. You have to start acting responsibly, or you will regret the greatest hell revolution that this country has ever seen. Now you have to see. Now you have to see how sharp their eyes are. Now you have to see how today they write a ballpoint pen to the fire chief. They are going to write a star. They are going to write a star there. I repeat, so that you cannot write the wrong thing. I say the government must act responsibly with the truth. He must act responsibly when he makes political statements, when he wants to expel political warlords. He must act close to his people. Otherwise, he will lose his status, where the blood will flow into the country. The AWB does not want blood, but the AWB, because he does not want chaos, disorder, and blood to flow, he stands by his statements of the past, that you create revolutionary circumstances, that you do not change the power that you had to control peace, to ensure stability, to ensure economic progress, to ensure that you are going to give for Ellen Hendricks and for Rabansi. Now you are sitting with a third of that power. You are sitting with the best and the most powerful police force in the whole world. You are sitting with the best people's leader that ever existed. You are sitting with the sons of this Boer folk, and you forbid them to kill the murderers of the dark location that takes people guilty of murder. 1 or 2, 3 or 4 days, and the South African police and the SAV will freeze in order to restore order and stability to South Africa. But you do not let them do it. They become the political football in your hands. And if you're still so conceited that you, on the basis of decrees, issue ordinances that are not even in the police law, and then you lie, then you say, but the AWB propagates violence. May not the light of the AWB be a light of the SAV? Then you say further, you are under pressure. And we know, because there is hardly one white policeman for 2,000 people in South Africa. You are under pressure. You are standing up in Florida. And I say to you, I will give an order to the members of the AWB to join the police reserves, and I double your power. Why? Then the Commissar of Police hesitated for a few days. Then he said, we do not need him. Why not? Because he knows the AWB wants his country to give its descendants, and the AWB will not take his politics as nonsense. I say in the clearest language, with all due respect, members of the South African police, you have taken an oath of loyalty to your God, your own living area. You have sworn to God, loyal to the people, loyal to your fatherland. One of the South African policemen and one of the members of the South African Army is the program of principles of the African resistance movement. I ask the members of our forces to remain loyal to your food, to remain loyal to the sin of your life. While you are in power, stay loyal to your ideals. Stay loyal to the God for whom you have sworn. Stay loyal to your fatherland and stay loyal to the people. That is why there can never be a fight between the AWB, the SAP, or the SAW. That is why it is so scandalous that the National Party of the South African Peoples and Indians, with the privilege of the Parliament, because they know that we cannot stand up for a difficult case in the Parliament, and they say the AWB is just as dangerous as the ANC, as our sister Agnes Malang has done it. What can a Deputy Minister of Defence do? It is an impossibility to call the AWB and the ANC at the same time. The AWB stands for order and authority, for God, people, and fatherland. The ANC is a communist body whose task it is to kill the strong Christian and to kill the weak Christian, the woman and the child, in order to demoralize the strong. The AWB, since from this earth, is a product of the will of freedom. The AWB is the offspring of the beloved people who have prayed for a country of their God. The ANC belongs to the hatred of those outside who want to take what is not coming. The ANC is the product of the international communism. The president of communism, who is known in the world as the most vicious ideology, so unbearable that he was even prepared to kill 60 million of their own people. But the Katyn murders and the Katyn riots were shot down by 12,000 Polish officers in one single day. A country with wires fixed behind its back. A country with wires fixed behind its back